On a chilly December morning in San Francisco, a man in his 50s sat quietly on a worn cardboard box outside a bustling coffee shop. His weathered hands clutched a small cardboard sign, but unlike typical messages asking for help, this one read, "Former Tesla engineer, life took unexpected turns. Any work appreciated." The morning crowd rushed past him, their designer shoes clicking against the sidewalk, coffee cups in hand. Some glanced his way, while others pretended not to notice. His name was Robert Chen, though most people on the street had taken to calling him the engineer, a nickname that carried both respect and skepticism among the local community. Robert's appearance didn't match his past. His salt and pepper hair was unkempt, and his once pristine engineering jacket was now faded and torn. Yet his eyes remained sharp, constantly observing the world around him with an engineer's precision. He'd been living on these streets for 8 months, though it felt like years. That morning started like any other until a familiar Tesla Model S pulled up to the curb. Robert barely looked up, having grown accustomed to luxury cars in this part of the city. But something was different this time. The car's window rolled down, and there sat Elon Musk himself, studying the sign with genuine curiosity. "Former Tesla engineer?" Musk called out, his voice carrying a mix of surprise and intrigue. Robert nodded slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he recognized his former CEO. The memories of his days at Tesla came flooding back, the late nights working on battery optimization, the breakthrough moments, and then, the incident that changed everything. Musk stepped out of his car, ignoring the growing crowd of onlookers with their phones raised. "Tell me about your time at Tesla," he said, sitting down on a nearby bench and gesturing for Robert to join him. The simple act of treating him like a human being, not a charity case, brought tears to Robert's eyes. As Robert settled onto the bench, he began sharing his story. He had been part of Tesla's early engineering team, working on crucial battery development projects. His voice grew stronger as he described the technical challenges they'd faced, using terms and details that only someone who'd been there would know. "I worked on the Model S battery management system," Robert explained, his eyes lighting up with pride. "We had this persistent overheating issue in the early prototypes. I remember spending 3 straight days in the lab until we finally cracked it." Musk listened intently, occasionally nodding as he recognized the specific problems Robert described. The conversation shifted when Musk asked about what had led to Robert's current situation. Robert's voice grew quieter as he revealed pieces of his past. There had been a devastating personal loss, a series of mental health struggles, and finally, a crucial mistake at work that had cost him everything. "I lost my wife to cancer," Robert shared, his voice barely above a whisper. "The medical bills piled up, and I couldn't focus at work. Made a calculation error that could have compromised battery safety. I reported it immediately, but the damage to my reputation was done. After leaving Tesla, things just spiraled." As the morning sun climbed higher, more people gathered around, drawn by the unusual sight of the tech billionaire sitting with a homeless man. But neither Robert nor Musk seemed to notice, engrossed in a conversation that bridged their vastly different current circumstances but shared professional past. The story Robert was sharing wasn't just about technical expertise or career setbacks, it was about human resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. As he spoke, Musk's expression shifted from curiosity to genuine concern, especially when Robert described how he'd still spend his days sketching battery designs on discarded newspapers, unable to let go of his engineer's mind despite his circumstances. This first encounter would set in motion a chain of events that would not only change Robert's life but also challenge Musk's understanding of how quickly life circumstances can change for anyone, even the most talented engineers in his own company. Meanwhile, patrons of the coffee shop had stopped their morning routines, captivated by the unfolding scene. Some recognized the deeper truth in this moment, that the line between success and struggle was often thinner than most people cared to admit, and that brilliance could be found in the most unexpected places. As part 1 drew to a close, the morning sun cast long shadows across the San Francisco street, and Musk checked his phone, realizing he was late for a meeting. But before standing up, he turned to Robert with a thoughtful expression, clearly moved by what he'd heard. The next steps he would take would prove to be just the beginning of an extraordinary journey for both men. The following day, whispers spread through the local homeless community about Robert's encounter with Elon Musk. Many wondered if anything would come of it, while others shared their own stories of former lives in the tech industry. Robert, however, remained in his usual spot, sketching circuit diagrams on a piece of cardboard. What Robert didn't expect was the black Tesla that pulled up again, this time driven by one of Musk's assistants. The young woman stepped out, holding a tablet and wearing a kind but professional expression. "Mr. Chen," she called out, using his name with respect, something he hadn't heard in months. "Mr. Musk would like to invite you to visit the Tesla facility." Robert's hands trembled as he read the official visitor's pass she handed him. Before he could worry about his appearance, the assistant gestured to a small bag she carried. "We brought some clean clothes and supplies. There's a nearby gym where you can freshen up. Take your time, we'll wait." An hour later, Robert emerged from the gym, clean-shaven and wearing simple but professional attire. His reflection in the car window showed glimpses of his former self, though his eyes carried the weight of his recent experiences. The drive to Tesla's facility was quiet, with Robert watching the familiar Bay Area landscape pass by. As they approached the Tesla headquarters, memories flooded back. Robert remembered the countless nights he'd spent in these buildings, working on projects that had once defined his life. The security guard at the entrance, an older man named Gene, recognized him immediately. "Mr. Chen. It's been years." The genuine warmth in Jin's voice brought a lump to Robert's throat. Inside the facility, Robert noticed both familiar elements and new changes. The innovation center he'd helped design still stood, but new wings had been added. Young engineers hurried past, carrying tablets and prototypes, reminding him of his younger self. Some gave him curious glances, unaware that he had once walked these halls as one of Tesla's leading engineers. Musk was waiting in a small conference room, not his grand office, a choice that made Robert feel more at ease. On the table lay some of Robert's old project files, including the battery management system he'd helped pioneer. "I had our team pull these up," Musk explained. "Your work on thermal regulation was years ahead of its time." What followed was a deep technical discussion that proved Robert hadn't lost his edge despite his circumstances. He pointed out potential improvements to current designs, drawing on both his past experience and the theoretical work he'd continued even while homeless. His mind was still sharp, his passion for engineering undimmed by hardship. However, the conversation eventually turned to the incident that had led to his departure. Robert's voice grew heavy as he explained the full story. The mounting medical bills for his wife's cancer treatment had consumed his savings. Sleepless nights spent in hospital rooms had affected his work. The calculation error he'd made, while caught and reported immediately, had seemed like the final straw in a series of personal catastrophes. "I couldn't focus," Robert admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "When the review board met, I didn't defend myself. I just accepted everything. After my wife passed, nothing seemed to matter anymore." He explained how he'd sold his house to pay the remaining medical bills, how depression had isolated him from friends and colleagues, and how eventually, he'd found himself on the streets. Musk listened intently, occasionally making notes. What struck him most was how Robert had continued to innovate even in his darkest moments. The sketches Robert had made on newspapers and cardboard showed potential solutions to current Tesla challenges, ideas born from an engineer's mind that refused to stop working, even when the world had seemed to stop caring. As their meeting drew to a close, Musk shared his own perspective on failure and resilience. He spoke about Tesla's near bankruptcy in 2008, about moments when everything seemed lost. The difference between success and failure, he noted, often isn't about ability, but about having a support system when you need it most. Robert noticed other changes in the facility since his time there. A mental health center had been established for employees, and there were support programs he wished had existed during his crisis. The Tesla of today seemed more attuned to the human elements of innovation, not just the technical ones. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the facility's windows, Musk's assistant returned with a folder. Inside was not just a job offer, but a comprehensive plan for Robert's reintegration, including temporary housing, counseling services, and a gradual return to engineering work. "We're not just offering you a job," Musk explained. "We're offering you a chance to rebuild." The day ended with Robert standing in the Tesla parking lot, holding the folder that represented a possible new beginning. As he watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors over the facility, he realized that sometimes the darkest moments could lead to unexpected light. His story wasn't just about falling from grace, it was about the possibility of rising again, with help from unexpected sources. The transition back into the working world wasn't as smooth as fairy tales might suggest. Robert's first week back at Tesla brought both triumphs and challenges. He now stayed in a comfortable temporary apartment provided by Tesla's Employee Assistance Program, but sleeping in a real bed felt strange after months on the streets. Sometimes, he'd wake up in a cold sweat, momentarily forgetting where he was. The company had assigned him to a small team working on battery efficiency improvements, starting with a part-time schedule to help him readjust. His new supervisor, Dr. Lee, was a compassionate woman who had actually studied some of Robert's earlier work in her graduate program. She created an environment where Robert could ease back into the rhythm of professional life without feeling overwhelmed. But the emotional hurdles were significant. Robert noticed how some employees would whisper when he passed by in the hallways. He caught fragments of conversations, "That's the homeless engineer Musk found." Or, "Can we really trust him with critical projects?" The word stung, but Robert understood their concerns. Trust, like respect, had to be rebuilt gradually. During his third day back, Robert faced his first major challenge. During a team meeting, while discussing a new battery cooling system, his hands started shaking uncontrollably. The memories of his last project failure came rushing back, along with the image of his wife in the hospital. Dr. Lee noticed immediately and called for a break, but Robert had already stepped out of the room, breathing heavily. He found himself in the facility's courtyard, sitting on a bench similar to the one where he'd first talked with Musk. The company's counselor, who had been working with him since his return, found him there. "Recovery isn't linear," she reminded him gently. "Your brain is still processing months of trauma. It's okay to take steps backward sometimes." What surprised Robert most was the support from unexpected quarters. Gene, the security guard, would save him a cup of coffee every morning, sharing stories about his own family struggles and triumphs. A young intern named Raj would eat lunch with him, eagerly asking questions about the early days of electric vehicle development. These small acts of kindness helped anchor him in his new reality. 1 month into his return, Robert faced a pivotal moment. The team was struggling with a persistent issue in a new battery design. Something about the thermal distribution pattern seemed off. During a late-night session, as Robert studied the data, he recognized a pattern similar to one he'd sketched on cardboard during his homeless days. Those long hours of theoretical thinking, even without resources, had kept his problem-solving skills sharp. He hesitated to speak up, remembering his past mistake. But Dr. Lee had noticed his expression. "What are you seeing, Robert?" she asked, giving him an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Robert walked to the whiteboard and began explaining his theory. The room fell silent as he drew, his hands steady now, confident in the mathematics he'd worked out even during his darkest days. As he finished his explanation, one of the senior engineers who'd initially been skeptical of his return spoke up. This could work," he admitted, running the numbers through his tablet. "The thermal distribution would be much more efficient. The room buzzed with excitement as the team began running simulations based on Robert's insight. That evening, as the successful simulation results came in, Robert received an unexpected email from Musk: "Your solution to the thermal distribution problem is elegant. This is why second chances matter. Keep going." The simple message brought tears to his eyes, not from sadness this time, but from the realization that his engineering mind had never truly left him. The news of Robert's contribution spread through the company. Gradually, the whispers in the hallways changed. Now people would point him out as the engineer who'd solved the thermal distribution puzzle. His past homelessness became less of a defining characteristic as his current contributions spoke louder than his history. During a company-wide meeting, Musk used Robert's story to announce a new initiative, a comprehensive employee support program that would help prevent others from falling through the cracks during personal crises. Innovation doesn't just come from stable environments, Musk explained. Sometimes it comes from those who have seen both the heights and depths of life. Robert's small apartment began to feel more like home. He'd started keeping a journal, documenting both technical ideas and personal reflections. One evening, looking at his reflection in the window, he saw something different, not just the homeless man he'd been, not just the successful engineer he'd once been, but someone new, someone who carried both experiences as part of his strength. As the third month of his return approached, Robert was asked to mentor a group of new engineers. Initially, he hesitated, wondering if he was ready for such responsibility. But then he remembered something his wife had once told him: "Your greatest contributions might come from the wisdom gained in your hardest moments." The story of Robert's return to Tesla had begun spreading beyond the company walls, inspiring other tech firms to re-examine their support systems for employees in crisis. What had started as one man's journey back from the brink was slowly transforming into a larger conversation about humanity in the tech industry. 6 months into Robert's return to Tesla, life had developed a new rhythm. His contributions to the battery thermal management system had moved from theoretical to practical implementation, and early tests showed promising results. However, a different kind of challenge emerged when a local news station caught wind of his story. The morning started typically enough. Robert was reviewing simulation data when Dr. Lee called him into her office. "The media's asking for interviews," she explained gently. "They're calling it the homeless engineer's redemption. Mr. Musk thinks it could help others in similar situations, but the choice is yours." Robert sat quietly, processing this development. His journey from the streets back to Tesla had been personal, filled with struggles that couldn't be captured in sound bites. Yet he thought about the countless others he'd met during his time on the streets, former professionals who'd lost everything to medical bills, mental health challenges, or unexpected life events. After careful consideration, Robert agreed to one interview, but with conditions. He wanted to focus not on himself, but on the larger issues: the thin line between stability and crisis, the importance of mental health support, and the need for compassionate corporate policies. The interview would take place at Tesla, where he felt most comfortable. The day of the interview brought unexpected anxiety. Robert chose to wear his regular work clothes rather than anything fancy, wanting to present himself authentically. As the cameras set up in the Innovation Center, he noticed his hands trembling slightly, a reminder that healing was still an ongoing process. The interviewer, an experienced journalist, started with the expected questions about his fall from success and his chance encounter with Musk. But when she asked about his time on the streets, Robert steered the conversation in a different direction. He spoke about Zhang, a former software developer he'd met who lost everything caring for his elderly parents. He mentioned the retired teacher who'd shared her food with him during his darkest days. "People see homelessness as a personal failure," Robert explained, his voice steady. "But often, it's a system failure. When I was designing battery systems, we always built in redundancies, backup systems to prevent catastrophic failure. Society needs similar support systems for its people." The interview took an unexpected turn when Robert pulled out some of his old cardboard sketches, preserved by a kind coffee shop owner during his time on the streets. "Engineering isn't just something you do in a lab," he explained, showing complex thermal distribution diagrams drawn on discarded packaging. "It's a way of thinking that stays with you, even when you've lost everything else." Back in the office after the interview, Robert received an unexpected visit from a group of young engineers. They'd been watching the interview live stream, and one of them, a quiet developer named Priya, shared how her family had nearly lost everything during a medical crisis. "Your story, it makes it okay to talk about these things," she said softly. That evening, Musk called a meeting with the executive team, with Robert in attendance. The discussion centered around expanding Tesla's employee support programs. Robert listened as his personal experience transformed into corporate policy, emergency housing assistance, extended medical leave, mental health support, and a peer counseling system. "We're not just building cars," Musk declared, "we're building a community. And communities take care of their own." The words resonated deeply with Robert, who remembered how alone he'd felt during his wife's illness and after her passing. The next few weeks brought an unexpected flood of emails and messages. Former colleagues from other tech companies reached out, sharing their own stories of struggles and recovery. A support group formed organically among Tesla employees, meeting weekly to discuss mental health and life challenges. Robert attended but chose to mostly listen, understanding that sometimes presence matters more than words. His apartment began filling with small signs of a life rebuilt. Photos of his late wife returned to the walls, no longer too painful to look at. He'd started volunteering at a local STEM education program for homeless youth, teaching basic engineering principles to kids who reminded him of himself during his darkest days. One rainy evening, Robert found himself driving past his old spot outside the coffee shop. He parked and walked over to the bench where Musk had first sat with him. The coffee shop owner, who'd kept his cardboard sketches safe, rushed out with a cup of his usual order. She'd never stopped preparing it, even after he left the streets. As they talked, a young man approached, clutching a degree in computer science and a story of recent homelessness. Robert listened, remembering his own story, and then pulled out his phone to make a call. The cycle of compassion that had saved him was ready to turn again. The media coverage of Robert's story had an unexpected ripple effect. Other tech companies began examining their employee support systems. Some reached out to Tesla for guidance in implementing similar programs. What had started as one man's journey back from the brink was catalyzing systemic change. That night, as Robert worked late in his office, he noticed a small plaque had been added to the Innovation Center wall. "The greatest engineering challenge is building a society that catches people when they fall." Below it, in smaller text, was his name and the date of his return to Tesla. The plaque reminded him that his story wasn't just about personal redemption, it was about transforming personal pain into positive change. As he touched the cool metal of the plaque, Robert thought about how life's circuits sometimes needed to break completely before they could be rebuilt stronger. 1 year after Robert's return to Tesla, his impact had extended far beyond engineering innovations. The employee support program he'd helped inspire, now formally named the Second Chance Initiative, had already helped dozens of Tesla employees navigate personal crises without losing their jobs. But a new challenge emerged that would test both Robert and the company in unexpected ways. It began during a routine meeting when Robert noticed a familiar name in a stack of job applications: Mr. Park, a brilliant electrical engineer who'd once been his mentor at Tesla. The same man who'd supported Robert during his early career was now applying for a junior position, his recent employment history showing a 3-year gap. Reading through Park's application, Robert's hands grew cold. The story hidden in those papers was painfully familiar: a family health crisis, mounting medical bills, depression, and a gradual descent into poverty. Park had left the industry quietly, his departure barely noticed in the fast-paced tech world. Now, at 62, he was trying to find his way back. Robert immediately took the application to Dr. Lee, who shared his concern. "This is different from your case," she cautioned. The board might see hiring someone his age, after such a long gap, as too risky. But Robert couldn't let it go. He remembered how Park had once stayed late to help him master complex calculations. How he'd shared homemade lunches and wisdom about both circuits and life. Taking a deep breath, Robert scheduled a meeting with Musk. As he prepared his presentation, he pulled up statistics about experienced engineers forced out of the industry due to personal crises. The numbers told a story of valuable talent lost, of experience discarded due to life's unexpected turns. The meeting with Musk was scheduled for early morning. Robert arrived early, his tablet filled with data and his heart heavy with memories. He started by sharing Park's contributions to Tesla's early battery designs, then moved to the broader issue of experienced engineers facing age discrimination after career gaps. "We talk about diversity," Robert argued, his voice steady, "but we often forget about age and experience. Sometimes our most valuable assets are the ones we've left behind." He showed how Park's theoretical work during his employment gap, like Robert's own street-side sketches, demonstrated a mind that had never stopped engineering. Musk listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions about liability and training costs. But when Robert played a video message from Park, recorded at a public library computer, the human element broke through. Park spoke of his passion for engineering, his desire to contribute again, and his hope that society wouldn't discard people who'd stumbled due to circumstances beyond their control. After a long moment of silence, Musk made a decision that would again reshape Tesla's approach to hiring. Create a program, he directed, specifically for returning engineers. Not just a second chance, but a recognition that experience doesn't expire when life gets difficult. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Robert worked with HR to design what would become the Engineering Renewal Program. It would provide refresher courses, mentoring, and a gradual return to full responsibilities. Park would be its first participant, but not its last. When Park arrived for his first day, Robert was waiting in the lobby. The older engineers' eyes were moist as they embraced, mentor and mentee, their roles now beautifully reversed. "I never thought I'd walk through these doors again," Park whispered, his hands trembling much like Robert's had a year ago. The integration wasn't without its challenges. Some team members initially questioned whether Park could adapt to new technologies. But Robert had anticipated this, creating a system where Park's deep theoretical knowledge could complement the younger engineers' familiarity with new tools. During his first week, Park solved a persistent grounding issue that had stumped the team for months. His solution drew from both classic engineering principles and innovative thinking developed during his time away. The younger engineers began seeking him out, not just for technical guidance but for his perspective on problem solving. Robert watched with quiet satisfaction as Park gradually regained his confidence. During lunch breaks, the two men would sometimes sit together, sharing stories of their time away from Tesla and their journey back. Their conversations often attracted others, creating an informal support group for employees facing personal challenges. The success of Park's return led to an expansion of the Engineering Renewal Program. Tesla began actively searching for other experienced engineers who'd left the industry due to personal crises. The program's motto, suggested by Park himself, was simple but powerful: engineering problems have solutions. So do human ones. As autumn approached, Robert received an invitation to speak at a tech industry conference about the program. Standing at the podium, looking out at faces both young and old, he shared not just his story, but the larger message it represented. Innovation isn't just about new technology, he declared. It's about recognizing that human potential doesn't expire, that experience gained through struggle has its own unique value. The presentation ended with a surprise, Park joining him on stage, along with 3 other engineers who'd returned to the industry through Tesla's program. Each had a story of falling and rising, of knowledge preserved through hardship, of dignity regained through opportunity. 18 months after Robert's return to Tesla, the company faced an unexpected crisis that would put both the Second Chance initiative and the engineering renewal program to their greatest test. A critical battery manufacturing issue threatened to halt production across multiple plants, potentially affecting thousands of jobs. The problem emerged during routine quality testing when several battery units showed unusual thermal patterns. The issue wasn't catastrophic, but it was serious enough to require immediate attention. As teams of engineers gathered in the crisis center, Robert noticed something familiar about the heat distribution graphs. Late one night, as he studied the data for the 100th time, Park knocked on his office door. The older engineer had been examining historical data from his early days at Tesla. "Robert," he said quietly, "I think I've seen this pattern before, back in 2008. We dismissed it then because the technology was different, but maybe." The two men spent the next several hours poring over old records, their combined experience spanning decades of Tesla's history. What they discovered was fascinating. The current problem had roots in an old design challenge they'd faced years ago, but at a much smaller scale. Robert immediately called Dr. Lee, who arrived still wearing her gym clothes. As they explained their theory, her eyes widened. "This could explain why our current solutions aren't working," she said, quickly pulling up simulation models on her tablet. "We're treating it as a new problem when it's actually an old one that's evolved." The next morning, they presented their findings to Musk and the executive team. Robert and Park had worked through the night, creating a presentation that combined historical data with current challenges. Their solution was unconventional. It required looking backward to move forward. "The beauty of having engineers who've seen both the company's past and present," Robert explained, "is that we can recognize patterns others might miss. Sometimes the best innovations come from understanding history." Park added technical details from his early days, painting a picture of how the current crisis had developed over years. Musk listened intently, occasionally interrupting with quick questions. The solution would require temporarily halting production, a costly decision. But the alternative could be worse. After a tense hour of discussion, he gave them the green light. "Make it work," he said simply, trusting their combined experience. What followed was an intensive 2-week period that brought together Tesla's past and present. Young engineers worked alongside program participants, combining new technologies with time-tested principles. Robert and Park became the bridge between generations, translating experience into innovation. The pressure was intense. News of the production halt had leaked to the media, and Tesla's stock price was fluctuating wildly. Some board members questioned whether trusting such a crucial fix to restored engineers was wise. But Robert and Park remained focused, their past struggles having taught them to work through doubt and criticism. During this crisis, something remarkable happened within the company. The artificial barriers between regular employees and those who'd returned through the Second Chance initiative began to fade. Crisis has a way of revealing true capability, and in those pressure-filled days, what mattered was solutions, not histories. One young engineer, who'd initially been skeptical of the engineering renewal program, found herself working closely with Park on the thermal control systems. By the third day, she was bringing him coffee and eagerly absorbing his insights about both engineering and life resilience. "It's like having a time machine," she commented during a team meeting. "We get to combine decades of experience with cutting-edge technology." Robert noticed how the crisis brought out different strengths in different team members. Those who'd faced personal struggles often showed remarkable calm under pressure, their past experiences having taught them to navigate uncertainty. The Second Chance engineers became anchors of stability during the stormy weeks. On day 12, at 3:47 a.m., the first test of their solution showed positive results. The thermal pattern stabilized, and the battery units performed within optimal parameters. Robert and Park were in the lab when the data came in, their exhausted faces reflecting in the computer screens. The success of their solution did more than just resolve a technical crisis, it validated Tesla's innovative approach to human resources. The board members who'd questioned the Second Chance initiative now saw its value in concrete terms. Experience, even when interrupted by life's challenges, proved to be an invaluable asset. In the aftermath of the crisis, Musk called a company-wide meeting. Standing on the factory floor, he acknowledged not just the technical solution, but the human story behind it. Innovation doesn't just come from new ideas, he declared. It comes from understanding where we've been and learning from those who've weathered storms. The event marked a turning point in how the tech industry viewed experience and recovery. Other companies began reaching out to Tesla, wanting to learn more about their programs for returning engineers. The story of how restored engineers had helped save Tesla from a major crisis became a powerful narrative in Silicon Valley. Robert and Park found themselves at the center of this change, but their focus remained on the work. They began documenting their experiences and insights, creating a knowledge base that would help future generations of engineers understand both the technical and human aspects of innovation. One evening, as they were leaving the office, Park turned to Robert with a slight smile. "You know," he said, "sometimes the best engineering isn't about building new things. Sometimes it's about rebuilding, both machines and people." Robert nodded, understanding that their greatest contribution might not be the technical solutions they'd developed, but the paths they'd helped create for others to return from their own struggles. 2 years into Robert's return, Tesla faced an unexpected opportunity that would test the full potential of their renewed approach to innovation. The government had announced a major initiative for sustainable energy storage, with $1 billion grant at stake. The catch? The proposal needed to demonstrate not just technical innovation, but social impact as well. The announcement came during a regular morning meeting. Robert sat quietly as various team leaders pitched their ideas, each focused primarily on technical specifications. But his mind wandered to the makeshift engineering classes he'd been teaching at the local homeless shelter on weekends, classes that had started small but now attracted dozens of eager learners. During a break, Robert found himself standing with Park near the coffee machine. "You're thinking what I'm thinking?" Park asked, noting Robert's thoughtful expression. Robert nodded, pulling out his tablet to show Park some photos from his weekend classes. Among them was a picture of a former tech worker who'd lost everything in a market crash but still spent hours helping others understand basic circuit design. That afternoon, they requested a meeting with Musk and Dr. Lee. Their proposal was ambitious: combine Tesla's technical expertise with a comprehensive training program for people rebuilding their lives. The battery production facilities would include dedicated spaces for teaching and hands-on learning, creating a pipeline for those seeking to return to the tech industry or enter it for the first time. "We're not just building batteries," Robert explained, his voice passionate. "We're building futures." He shared stories from his shelter classes, of a former medical researcher who'd become homeless after a lengthy illness, of a young woman who'd fled domestic violence with an engineering degree but no professional experience, of veterans struggling to translate their technical military experience to civilian jobs. Musk listened intently, occasionally making notes. The proposal was risky. Combining cutting-edge technology development with social rehabilitation wasn't a conventional approach. But as Robert and Park laid out their vision, the potential became clear. This wasn't just about meeting government requirements, it was about revolutionizing how the tech industry approached talent and opportunity. The preparation for the grant proposal consumed the next few weeks. Robert and Park worked with teams across Tesla, integrating technical innovations with social impact strategies. They brought in successful graduates from the Second Chance initiative to help design training programs, understanding that those who'd walked the path could best guide others along it. During this time, Robert received an unexpected visit from someone he'd met during his homeless days, a young man named Dev who'd been sleeping in the same alley. Dev had recently completed a coding bootcamp and was looking for an opportunity. Robert immediately integrated him into the grant preparation team, knowing that his perspective would be invaluable. The grant presentation day arrived with heavy anticipation. Robert and Park had chosen to begin not with technical specifications, but with stories. They showed videos of their weekend engineering classes, of people rebuilding their lives through technology. Then they seamlessly connected these human elements to Tesla's innovative battery designs. The future of energy storage, Robert explained to the grant committee, isn't just about better batteries. It's about better builders of batteries. Every person who's fallen and risen again brings unique insights to the innovation process. He demonstrated how their proposed facility would integrate production with education, creating a sustainable model for both energy and human development. The presentation included live video links to several of Robert's shelter students, who spoke about how access to technical education had rekindled their hope. Park followed with detailed explanations of how their experiences with the Engineering Renewal Program had revealed the untapped potential in overlooked populations. As they concluded, one committee member asked about the risks of combining production with rehabilitation. Robert's response was immediate: the greatest risk in innovation isn't failure, it's failing to recognize the potential in people who've been written off. Every person in this room has probably been one crisis away from losing everything. We're proposing to build not just a safety net, but a launching pad. The weeks following the presentation were tense with anticipation. Robert continued his shelter classes, now joined by a rotating group of Tesla engineers who'd been inspired by the grant proposal. The classes had grown to include basic coding, circuit design, and even 3D printing, all taught by volunteers who understood the importance of second chances. Then the news came: Tesla had won the grant. But the real victory wasn't just in the funding, it was in the committee's decision to make their integrated model a requirement for future sustainable energy projects. The approach Robert and Park had developed would become a standard for the industry. The announcement triggered a flood of applications from people seeking to rebuild their lives through technology. Robert found himself working with HR to develop screening processes that could identify potential while recognizing that traditional metrics might not apply to those who'd faced significant life challenges. One evening, as Robert walked through the prototype space for their new facility, he paused at a wall where they'd mounted photos of their weekend engineering classes. Among them was a picture of him from his homeless days, sketching battery designs on cardboard. Beside it hung Park's library card from his unemployment period, which he'd used to access technical journals and keep his knowledge current. These items would become part of the facility's permanent display, reminding everyone that innovation often comes from unexpected places. As Robert stood there, he received a message from Musk. The board had unanimously approved an expansion of their program to all Tesla facilities worldwide. The message included a quote that would later be inscribed at the entrance of their new training center: "The future of technology lies not just in what we build, but in who we help rebuild themselves to build it." 3 years after that fateful morning when Musk first noticed Robert's cardboard sign, Tesla hosted a unique graduation ceremony. The company's first integrated class of engineers, combining traditional hires with graduates from their rehabilitation program, was completing their training at the new facility built with the government grant. The auditorium buzzed with an energy that went beyond typical graduation excitement. Among the graduates were former executives who'd lost everything in personal crises, veterans transitioning to civilian life, and people who'd experienced homelessness but never lost their drive to learn. Their stories had become part of Tesla's new narrative about innovation and human potential. Robert stood at the podium, looking out at the diverse crowd. His hands, once trembling from anxiety, were now steady as he adjusted the microphone. Beside him sat Park, who'd become more than a colleague. They'd become symbols of how life's darkest moments could lead to unprecedented opportunities for others. 3 years ago, Robert began, his voice clear and confident, "I was sitting on a street corner with a cardboard sign. Today, I see that same cardboard in our company museum, next to the patents it inspired." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the audience. "But this ceremony isn't about me or my journey. It's about what happens when we stop seeing human struggles as endpoints and start seeing them as part of the innovation process." The ceremony included something unprecedented: job offers from 12 different tech companies, all of whom had adopted Tesla's integrated training model. The industry was finally recognizing that diverse life experiences could lead to stronger innovation teams. During the event, Musk shared some surprising statistics. The patents filed by teams including program graduates showed a 40% higher rate of practical application solutions compared to traditional teams. Their perspectives, shaped by real-world challenges, brought a unique approach to problem-solving that the industry badly needed. The most moving moment came when one of the graduates, an elderly woman who'd lost her tech career during a family crisis, presented a new battery monitoring system she developed. Her design incorporated safeguards inspired by her experience of helping other homeless people charge their phones safely, a real-world problem most engineers had never considered. After the ceremony, Robert found himself in the facility's courtyard, where they'd installed benches similar to the one where his journey back had begun. He sat down, joined by Park and Dr. Lee, watching as graduates celebrated with their families. The scene was far removed from his days on the street, yet he could still feel the connection to that time. A young reporter approached, asking about the program's future. Robert smiled, explaining how Tesla's model was being adapted globally. But the real story, he added, isn't in the numbers or even the innovations. It's in how we've redefined what it means to be an engineer. Every person here brings their whole life experience to their work, including their struggles. That evening, Tesla unveiled its newest initiative, a global network of training centers, each adapted to local needs but all built on the principle that talent can be found in unexpected places. The program would expand beyond engineering to include all aspects of sustainable technology development. As the celebration wound down, Robert received an unexpected gift from his shelter class students, a framed collection of their own cardboard sketches, mimicking how he'd once kept his engineering dreams alive on the streets. The frame bore a simple inscription: "Sometimes rock bottom is the foundation for building something extraordinary." Later that night, alone in his office, Robert opened an email from Musk. It contained approval for something he'd been planning quietly, a foundation to help children of homeless families access STEM education. The funding would ensure that future generations wouldn't have to wait for a chance encounter to rebuild their lives. Robert's journey had come full circle, but it wasn't just his story anymore. It had become a blueprint for how companies could approach innovation differently, recognizing that human potential doesn't disappear during life's darkest moments, it often grows stronger. As he prepared to leave for the day, Robert noticed a group of new program participants touring the facility. Their faces showed the same mix of hope and uncertainty he'd felt 3 years ago. He joined their tour briefly, sharing not his title or achievements, but simply his understanding of their journey. The greatest engineering challenge, he told them, echoing the words now inscribed on Tesla's training centers worldwide, isn't building perfect systems. It's building systems that recognize and restore the perfection in broken things, whether they're batteries or lives. The story of the homeless engineer had evolved into something larger than one man's redemption. It had become a movement, challenging how society viewed both innovation and human potential. As Robert finally headed home that evening, he smiled at the thought that somewhere, perhaps on another street corner, another engineer was sketching tomorrow's solutions, waiting for their chance to rise again. The security guard, Gene, stopped him at the exit. "Changed the world, didn't you?" he said with a knowing smile. Robert shook his head. "No," he replied, "we just showed the world how to change itself." As he drove home under the starlit sky, Robert remembered his wife's words about wisdom gained from hardship. She would have been proud to see how personal pain had transformed into universal hope.